In spring of 2015, I had the opportunity to study abroad for the semester, which I readily took, and began my 4-month adventure in Rome, Italy. The fortunate thing about studying abroad and turning 21 is that you forevermore get to brag about which city you celebrated your birthday. My best friend Dee was one of those lucky people and chose Paris, France to spend her birthday weekend. So when she asked if I'd come along, I told her that of course I would go to Paris with her, but that I had to take a later flight than hers and our other 2 friends because I had an exam earlier that Thursday. This would be the first time I'd be traveling alone, but I felt confident that I would be able to handle the trip, even if I would be taking a taxi, an airplane, a bus, and 2 underground rails before I'd reach our Airbnb. My plane landed at around 8 p.m., and the trip to the Airbnb was 3 hours. I was feeling comfortable, as I had not a phone the entire time I studied abroad, and I had gotten used to printing out directions. I studied up on my French while on the plane, and navigated my way to the bus which would take me to the underground. I tossed my luggage in the storage compartment of the large Greyhound-esque bus, and spotted an older woman struggling with her bags while her husband asked the driver some questions in broken French. I offered to help, and she let out an exasperated gasp and let her bag drop to the ground. "You're American! Oh, thank goodness! Don't take this the wrong way, but it is such a relief to hear someone from your own country. It can be overwhelming listening to all the different accents all day long," she said in one breath. I smiled and told her not to worry, that I completely understood what she meant, as I helped her lift her luggage into the compartment. I hopped on the bus and took my seat, when I saw a middle-aged man, of average height, pretend not to look at me as he walked down the aisle. I don't know exactly what it was, but he gave off an uncomfortable vibe, so I pretended not to understand French when he spoke to me. "Puis m'asseoir ici?" he asked again, which is him asking if he could sit there in the seat next to me. Sorry," I replied, pretending again not to understand him. "Ah, American girl," he exclaimed happily, and I nodded with a half-hearted smile. He sat down next to me and asked if I knew any French. His English was very broken, so I said no, hoping that he would not be able to hold a conversation well if I could not understand anything he said. "So you come to France not speaking any French?" he said teasingly. "Of course I know some French, you jackass. Why would I go to a country alone without having learned some of the language?" I thought to myself, but said nothing. I just continued to give him my, "I don't know what you want me to say, bud," face. He continued to stare at me, and I grew more uncomfortable. I pulled out my current pleasure reading book, funnily enough named "I'm Not Scared," a story of an Italian boy whose family had kidnapped another little boy, and began to read it. But why on earth would I think that my obvious disinterest in the conversation would deter his questioning? He leaned in, hot breath on my shoulder, and I moved as close to the window as I could. "Do you have a boyfriend?" he asked. In most cases, I told the truth that no, I did not, but I felt extremely uncomfortable around this guy. "Yes," I said, and turned back to my book as he leaned away. "Oh, is he in the States?" I stupidly replied yes, and his eyes seemed to light up. If my mythical boyfriend was in the States, he couldn't mythically save me from this creep on the bus. "No," I thought, trying to toughen up. "You don't need saving by anyone." This thought reassured me as I knew that I was a strong woman, and I had been able to take care of myself in many situations, albeit this one was making my stomach twist more than normal. He began to ask another question, but I looked at him, raised my book, and nodded at it, indicating that I would like to get back to my story. "Oh, sorry, he apologized with a smile. I got a good 20 minutes of silence from this guy as I read. I heard some exclamation from the passenger in the seat behind mine, and I looked up. The Eiffel Tower was in the distance and sparkling. I smiled to myself for a few seconds until my moment was stolen by a tug on my sleeve. I looked towards the man as he pointed out the window and said impressively, That is the Eiffel Tower." No shit, Einstein, I thought. I went back to my book until the bus arrived at our stop and breathed a sigh of relief as we pulled in. I would finally be able to get away from this guy. But that would be too easy now, wouldn't it? He urged me to exit in front of him, and I did so begrudgingly. I did not want him able to see where I was planning on going. As quickly as I could, I exited the bus, but I had to wait for the other passengers to unload their luggage from the bottom compartment before I could reach my bag. I glanced to my left and froze. The guy was standing there a few yards away, without any luggage, watching me intently. I turned back as the passengers began to dwindle away, and I was able to get my bags. There were perhaps 4 other passengers standing around, but they had moved a fair distance away, and were talking amongst themselves or on their cell phones. I looked back at where the man had been, and he was still there, 5 minutes later, staring at me. I had never experienced this kind of real fear for my safety. It was dark. I was in a foreign country without a cell phone. I was alone, and I was a woman. I felt like the perfect target. I did my best to muster up the courage to appear confident and tough, but that did not seem to faze the man. I briskly began to walk towards the underground stairs, and I felt him following me. I felt the panic swell inside my chest as I whipped my head around to see if there was anyone I could go to for help. Suddenly, as though someone was truly looking out for me, I spot the older American woman that I had helped load her luggage into the bus. Not pausing to think about what to say, I made a beeline for her and her husband. I reached them and blurted out in a hushed tone, "Can I pretend you're my parents?" They looked at me with surprise and a bit of confusion as I explained further that there was a man a few yards away who was following me and had not stopped staring at me. The woman glanced over my shoulder. "I see him. Yes, he is staring at you still," she muttered. They famously took on their role as mom and dad. Mom put a loving arm around my shoulder, and they pulled out a map to discuss where we should go for our family vacation. The woman suddenly turned by my side. Then I saw why. She had put herself between me and the slowly approaching creep. He pointed at me and said in broken English that he was already helping me find where I was going. "Oh, no need for that," she said stubbornly. "This is our daughter." He looked skeptical, but backed away. He did not leave for another few minutes, but the couple remained with me and walked me towards the underground. Once we were sure the man had left, I thanked them endlessly for their help, and they said no thanks were needed. They bid me farewell and safe travels, and I wished them well on their vacation. It wasn't the last harassing experience I had that evening, but after coming out of that encounter, it was like nothing could penetrate my aura of pure anger. If there is one thing to know about me, it's that I tend to turn to anger before I turn to sadness, fear, or upset. So I walked to my destination that night like I was on the hunt to murder some poor bastard. Men called out, but quickly retreated once my eyes locked with theirs. Since coming back to the States, I've taken up boxing at a gym near my university. It's given me a much better sense of self and strength, along with being an awesome way to let off some steam. And so far, I've been told I've got a pretty fast and dangerous punch. This event happened when I was 12, in the late 90s. I'm a girl, and though I've since grown about 4 inches, I was about 5'2" and barely 100 pounds. I grew up in an affluent neighborhood about 45 minutes away from a major city in the United States. My neighborhood was a total bedroom community with around 4,000 people, which means virtually no crime, aside from stupid rich tard kids driving around hitting mailboxes with a baseball bat. I had more sense early on, because both of my parents worked hard and taught me the value of doing the same, along with other virtues, such as respect, and just generally not being a total clown shoes asshole to people. I've always been very athletic, playing multiple sports from the time I was even mildly conscious, due to me having a good number of high-level athletes in my family, including my dad. My mom is from a major city and taught me the value of awareness of my surroundings early. All this will make sense in a moment. She always told me to have my keys to our house out and in my hand as soon as I got off the school bus to walk down my street home, though I never knew why. I'm so glad she always stressed this, because I'm pretty certain it saved my life. One day I say goodbye to my friends, and I hop off the bus and take the short walk down to my house. My street curves in a half circle, which makes it difficult to see around the curve. So basically, you can only see a bit in front of you or behind you as you walk. It's the least creepy street ever, neighbors all around with a comfortable distance between houses. As I'm mindlessly walking around my curving street, I get a funny feeling that makes me turn around and look behind me. Just as the crossing street is about to go out of my view, I see the man walking down the street that mine makes a T-shape with, the one I was dropped off on. Weird, I thought, as I've never seen him before. Not to say we know everyone, but what struck me as odd was that he wasn't really dressed like people did around there. He was dressed in jeans and a polo, both of which were way too big. I shrugged and kept walking, but something was really bothering me about this guy. I was about to walk past my next door neighbor's house, still pondering what it was making me feel scared, when I looked back again. I figured I'd have to walk into the street a bit to see where he went, but no. I had walked a fair distance, but this guy was suddenly no more than 10 feet from me. You always think in situations like this that you would scream or something, but my breath caught in my throat. I couldn't fathom how he'd gotten so close that fast, and his wide-eyed, hyper-focused stare threw daggers into my stomach. I was in big trouble. Not wanting to find out what the fuck he wanted, who he was, or why he was gaining on me, I went directly into flight mode, knowing that my house was only 100 yards away. I noped hard. I took off running across my driveway, and realized he was running after me, because I heard his feet on the asphalt, then on my driveway. I know he was close, but I didn't waste time looking back. Realizing my backpack, which probably weighed half of what I did, was slowing me down, I threw my arms back, holding my keys in a death grip. I knew I could outrun him if I weren't so heavy, and my backpack slipped off. I was able to gain a good distance on him, and I don't know if it was from panic or adrenaline, but my front door keyhole became huge in my eyesight, and I jammed my key in and got inside. I slammed my big-ass oak door so hard that it recoiled, and half thinking about what could happen if he got into my empty house, I slammed it closed and locked it. I stood there for a second, just wide-eyed and confused, until I realized I should look out the peephole. When I did, it was pitch black. More confusion. It was 3 p.m. I stood looking out the peephole and started to shake uncontrollably, and that's when I saw why it was black. Light started coming through as I saw this fucking creep's eye, and then him backing away from my door having tried to look in. He was that close to me. He stood there for a moment, eyeballing my door and house, probably looking for another way in. Then he started turning around on my porch to face the street, cursing under his breath. I could see him mouthing it, but couldn't hear, partially I'm sure because I was in total shock. Then he raises the creep factor to new heights. He skip walks off my porch, across my giant lawn to the street in the same direction we had been running, and raises his hand in the air. From behind my very tall pine trees on the right side from the vantage point, I see a white windowless van pull up in front, and he hops in. I can't see the driver because of the tinted windows in front, but they sat there, and I swear I could feel them looking at my door, maybe figuring out what to do next. They drove off, and I slumped to the floor, shaking and freaking out so hard that I legitimately had to crawl to my kitchen. I hid and called my mom, who despite working all the way downtown in the city, made the 45-minute drive home in 15. She then drove around ready to pull their spines out. Although she's the kindest person I've ever known, she will kick your ass, or worse if you mess with me. We called the cops, and I gave my statement, but they never found those freaks. I'm shaking writing this now. If you enjoyed this video, you know what to do. If you would like a chance to have your story featured in an upcoming video, make sure you check the description on information on how to submit your stories. Now for the first story, I can only imagine how terrifying it must be to be in another country, alone, with no cell phone, and be a female. Nowadays you have to be really careful of the sex traffickers, so who knows what this guy had in mind. Thankfully you were able to run across a couple that was very friendly, and took you under their wings. Otherwise we probably wouldn't be here listening to your experience now. I hope now you travel with at least a phone, because you never know what's gonna happen. Now for the second story. It's really a good thing you had great parents who raised you well. It very well could have saved your life. Very wise to always pay attention to where you're walking, because no matter how safe the neighborhood, you never know what's gonna happen. And sometimes you gotta think, even in the more rich neighborhoods, someone could be trying to kidnap one of the children for a ransom, so it could very well happen. I'm glad you were able to get out of the situation okay, and it's very unfortunate that they weren't able to find these guys, because I'm sure they're going to try it again. So now before I end this video, I have a very important announcement, so make sure you pay close attention. For everyone following my contest and collecting letters, the last letters you need can be found in the description by following a link to the video. I will have it clearly marked, and I will also have it in the comments. This is a time-sensitive video. Click on it and listen very carefully. Follow every step in that video, and you will be entered into the drawing. I wish you all the best of luck, and just remember, it is time-sensitive. I'll catch you guys in the next video, and just remember, it's always scarier if it's true.